the Light of Truth radio broadcast with Michael Boldea.
All right, welcome to the program and thank you for joining us. This is the Light of Truth radio broadcast. I am, as always, your humble host, Michael Boldea, and it's good to be with you again. Although this is a recording, it's kind of fresh. It's not the freshest, but fresh enough. Today is June the 30th, the year of our Lord 2025, so this will air in a couple days. Finally got a quiet place to do a recording. We've been in Romania for the last few days. Actually, it's been a week now. Made our way here. Been spending some time with my dad. Thankfully, he's looking a lot better than he was when we first got here. He spent some time in the hospital. He had surgery. Then he caught an infection in the hospital, wouldn't you know it? So it's been a trying time for the family. He's enjoying spending time with the girls. I think they bring him a lot of joy, and they're enjoying spending time with him. So those of you that have been praying for my dad, I thought I'd give you an update just to start with. He's doing better than he was when we got here about a week ago. He was looking very thin. He was looking very pale, very weak. He wasn't able to hold food down. But hopefully we've seen the valley and now we begin the climb back to the mountaintop. God's will be done. This is the mindset that we as children of God must possess in all things. It's difficult sometimes for us to realize that there's only so much we can do. It's difficult for us at times to realize the true extent of our impotence, I guess. Because no matter who we run to, no matter how many people we know, no matter how many doctors we know, we have doctors in the family. My brother Serge's, I guess, brother-in-law is head of surgery in one of the biggest hospitals in the region. But doctors can only do so much. And so we trust and we hope and we pray that in his goodness, God will do what he does best, which is the miraculous. So thankfully, he is doing better. Not out of the woods yet. He's still somewhat weak, but we've been spending a lot of time together. This is one of the reasons, largely the reason, probably the biggest reason, well, not probably, but most certainly the biggest reason why I decided to take this trip this summer. I'm not fond of traveling anymore, especially when traveling with children. It becomes not only expensive, but also very wearying, very tiresome. The schedule gets turned upside down and inside out. And I'm a creature of habit. When I'm at home, I know that I wake up at a certain time. I do a little bit of writing. I do a little bit of reading, praying. And it's one of those habitual things that carries me through the weeks and the months. Well, whenever you set out on a trip, especially a trip as long as ours, everything gets turned on its ear. Right now, I have brewed myself a delicious hot black cup of coffee, and it's past 8 p.m. So just for you, I'm likely to not fall asleep until well past midnight here, but it's the only time that worked today. We're going to be traveling a bit for the next week, and I wanted to record a program because the last two or three were recorded about a month ago now. So a lot has happened. I know you're thinking to yourself, you could have waited. No, not so much. Things are happening in the world. Apparently, the war with Iran that we've been discussing and talking about has come and gone. I think it was a very decisive finality because it's proven by what they say and also by their actions that if the world at large, I'm not saying America or Israel, but the world, allowed Israel to have a nuclear weapon. I think they put on rubber gloves and toss it at somebody before it got a chance to cool down. This is the problem with zealotry. This is the problem with a mindset and a culture that has no qualms about strapping suicide bombs to their children and sending them out to greet soldiers. It's not something that we understand. I can't understand it, but I know it's a reality because we're seeing it over and over again. Uh, it was a 12-day war by all accounts. It was decisive. What happens from here, the Lord only knows. But as far as attacks within the borders of the United States by either sleeper cells or rogue individuals who want to make a statement, I do not believe that is off the table by any means. I think we haven't even scratched the surface of how many people are willing to do unspeakable things because of their ideology. So, to those that thought we were going to go boots on the ground in Iran, I would have been opposed to it. But I think that of all the options we had, barring some sort of agreement before the strikes, this was likely the best option on the table. Now, things have been happening throughout the world. Apparently, Rwanda and the Congo decided that 30, 40 years of bloodletting was enough. And so they came to the negotiation table and they decided to make some sort of peace agreement. But a peace agreement is only as good as the willingness to hold to it. Paper is paper, whether signed or not. It's irrelevant if the blood starts to boil and people start killing each other again. So, although this is a silver lining because they've been killing each other for the longest time, we'll see where it goes. I know a lot of people want certainty. Well, we live in an uncertain world. Every morning you wake up and you wonder what's next. I'm still in awe of the fact that I wake up and there's no mushroom cloud anywhere within eyesight, whether I'm in Europe or I'm in America, because these are the days and the times that we're living in. We have to acknowledge the season in which we've entered. We have to acknowledge that peace has been snatched from the earth. And though men are making valiant efforts to try to negotiate peace, I do not believe it'll be a long lasting thing. I do not believe that it's something that'll stick for a long, long time because that's just the reality of the times that we live in. Now, what has been happening lately? I know you're thinking to yourself, it's been so long, so much has happened. Well, and more will happen. But the most recent thing, as far as what I'm hearing on this side of the pond, because I'm really not keeping up with much of the news in the US, but the European news is coming in fast and hot. Uh, Hungary. I know you're thinking to yourself, what? Hungary? Yes, Hungary. Hungary is one of a handful of solitary nations who are unwilling to embrace debauchery. They're one of a handful of European nations that are unwilling to go along with the whole, Pride Month nonsense. And basically, the whole of Europe erupted in protest against Hungary and its prime minister because they refused to bend the knee to the agenda. Now, thankfully, before we left, and we left, let's see, we left the country or the US on June 8th. So the month had started, but to my great surprise and relief, the whole nonsense of the past 4 or 5 years did not repeat this year. If there were any parades, they were muted as far as I knew. There weren't that many flags flying about. But once you land in a major country in Europe, you realize that although America has managed to staunch this just sprint towards hedonism, most of the westernized European nations have not and really have no desire to. So we landed in Vienna, Austria, and everywhere you looked, man, there were rainbow flags flying from every single flagpole, and you could see the average citizen wasn't pleased about it. You have to realize that the powers that be, those in charge, as the saying goes, don't care whether or not their citizens approve. They don't care whether their decisions and their choices are popular. Their only concern is pushing the agenda. And it's well financed and it's well organized. And right now, even though Hungary had said, no, we don't want any of this, they flew in from all over Europe. And this past Saturday, I believe, activists took to the streets of Budapest for a pride parade, even though the government of Viktor Orban enacted a de facto ban on such demonstrations earlier this year. And with that demonstration came the call from European nations to actually sanction Hungary for standing up for morality. Now, I've said it before and I will say it again because it is the truth. You cannot legislate morality. Morality is an organic thing that cannot be, well, you have to do this and that's moral. And if the Hungarian people choose the path of morality, if they choose the path of family, right now the Hungarians are giving benefits to individuals who are married and decide to have more than 2 or 3 children because they realize that most of the Western world currently is suffering from what is known as depopulation. Not enough children are being born to make up for the numbers of those who are dying, who are elderly and going to the grave. And so, because nobody's having babies in these Western nations, they import all kinds of people from all kinds of places who come with their beliefs, who come with their preconceived notions, and eventually, one generation in, that nation is no longer the nation the citizens of that nation knew it to be. It's become, little Pakistan, it's become, little Nigeria, it's become little Tokyo, whatever it is. And you've had this in the US for so long that we don't notice it. But in the European nations, where this just started in mass, maybe 10, 15 years ago, those that are natural born citizens of those nations realize that they have been invaded. It's not something that they see off into the future. It's not something that they think might happen after they're gone. They've already been invaded. There are places in London, in Paris, in Vienna, where the actual citizens fear to tread because those places have been wholly inhabited by migrants or people that came from different countries with their beliefs, with their practices, with whatever they do that it's not cohesive to the current standard of that nation. And they've made it their own, it's sort of like the Vatican in Rome. They're their own little nations, their own little fiefdoms. They make the rules, they make the laws, and they don't want actual citizens anywhere in the vicinity. And I have friends who live in these major cities, and they're all saying the same thing. There are big swaths of neighborhoods where we can't go into anymore because there will be violence if they see that you're a different skin color, skin tone, or that you're not wearing a certain dress, or one of those little turban thingies. So this is happening not just in America, but it's happening all over the world. The invasion is real. And it has a lot to do with the reality that the natural born citizens of those nations are no longer marrying, having children, having families, because hedonism has been pushed down the throats of the entire world for so long that it has now been normalized. And so when you have a nation like Hungary saying, we're going to focus on family, we're going to focus on God, we're going to do the things that we know will allow for the continuity of our country. All these other nations that have already gone the way of invasion, all these other nations that have no hope of redress, get so embittered and so angry that right now they're working on sanctions against Hungary because they refuse to host pride parades. And even though it was banned by Viktor Orban and his government, enough people flew in where they marched down the streets of Budapest. And this is the reality of the fallen world we live in. There's no place where you can go on the face of this earth where it remains unsullied, unsoiled, untouched, undefiled. Every single nation is dealing with the same problems, and those nations that have strong leaders, those nations that are unwilling to bend the knee, are being targeted by those who already have, because their citizens have a tendency to point to the strong leaders and point to the strong nations and go, why can't you do that? We've discussed this, and from the things I'm hearing here, and believe me, what you hear in a place like Europe is very different from what you hear in America, given that you're separated by an ocean, given that what is being put out via the news and via media isn't always the God's honest truth. There's this push for war by the major nations of Europe because they're terrified that their citizens, that their people will realize the true extent of their corruption, the true extent of their incompetence, and the true extent of how horribly they failed those who elected them to office. Now, it's not all, teddy bears and bunny rabbits and cotton candy in America either. Apparently, New York has decided that their best choice for governor is basically a communist. Now, I know that we like to try to split hairs and go, well, he's actually a socialist. But no, this guy's as close to a commie as you can get without getting the hammer and the sickle tattooed on your forearm. That's just the reality of it. So now, this individual named Mamdani, who seems as though he's going to be the next governor or mayor of New York, not governor, but mayor, I believe. Uh, he's come out with some of his supposed policies that are a little bit, let's just say, off putting for anyone that has two brain cells to rub together. And I know that a lot of the church is pushing this equity and equality thing, but there's no such thing as equity without having to, um, how do I best put it? Hobble. That's a good word. Without having to hobble somebody else in order for the others to catch up. So, socialist New York City mayoral candidate Zoran Mamdani, is considering taxing richer and wider neighborhoods, because why not? Now, when the other side seemingly practices racism, it seems to be perfectly acceptable. When the other side says, we should probably get rid of the criminals, the rapists, the pedophiles, the people that are in this country illegally doing horrible things, we should probably get rid of them. Well, that can't stand. That's racism. But this man has come out, and one of his campaign platform proposals is to hike property taxes for richer and wider neighborhoods. He's calling it a soak the rich proposal, Even though not all people who live in white neighborhoods are rich by any means, but this apparently has been called an effort to fix the city's skewed property tax system, where the higher end brownstones are assessed at lower rates than homes and rentals in lower income neighborhoods. Uh, on paper, well, why shouldn't the rich pay more? Well, because he's targeting a specific group of people, white neighborhoods. Now, again, I could pass for Middle Eastern, I could pass for Turkish, I could pass for Gypsy, I could pass for Mexican, Costa Rican, Puerto Rican, whatever you want. My pigment is such where I blend. But even so, taxing someone more based on the color of their skin seems a little, offensive, even to someone like me who can pass for a minority. So, look, we have to be honest about where we are. We have to point out the things that have been done that are a net positive, and we have to call out the things that are not so positive. The fact that the people voted for someone who is an open socialist and who's willing to tax people on the color of their skin isn't something to praise. It's not something that we should celebrate, and it's something that should concern us because it shows us the IQ level of most voters today. Allow me to sip from my delicious beverage, even though it'll keep me awake past the time I am to be abed. But it is what it is. Like I said, I do this for you. Now, within the United States, that is not only the only piece of news that I ran across, because even though I am here in the heart of Europe, maybe 30 odd miles from the Ukrainian border. So the things people focus on are very different than what, middle America might. I've noticed this tendency with this administration, and especially with El Presidente, that if anyone disagrees, they get thrown under the bus. I believe that this is a character flaw. I don't think it's a good thing. And the one that's currently under fire is Massey. By all accounts, Massey seems like a decent guy. He just wants to stop the spending. And when you realize that we're, $38 trillion in debt at this point, it's probably a good idea to stop the spending. So to throw somebody that is fiscally responsible under the bus because they're unwilling to co-sign a bill that has a lot of pork in it because it necessitated it due to the fact that a lot of Republicans wouldn't have signed on if the pork were not included. I think whoever is whispering in the big orange man's ear does not have his best interest at heart. Because I think Thomas Massey could be a good ally. I don't see him as a vile individual like the gentleman Lindsey Graham might be. Because while someone like Lindsey is more than willing to blow smoke and praise people to their face, I promise you, he's sharpening knives behind their backs. I think that his consistent and constant travels to Ukraine, and every time he goes, apparently Volodymyr Zelensky has a change of heart as far as coming to terms with some sort of agreement, is suspicious. So these are my 2 cents. I know I seem to be rambling, but there's a lot that's gone on, and I'm not even touching what's going on in the church today because I'd be here forever. And I can't because at some point I need sleep too. Uh, we've done okay with the time change and the jet lag. but I'm still waking up around 3 o'clock in the morning here in Romania. So I've been awake well over, let's see, 15, 17, 18 hours thus far. And so I can't say that I'm at my sharpest currently, but we press on because this is what we do. We are mules. We are horses bred for labor. And so we labor on. Uh, Another thing that it popped up on my phone as breaking news, and this happened, I believe, this morning. This morning being again June the 30th, the year of our Lord 2025, is that a shooter began to take pot shots at firefighters in Idaho while they were trying to put out a fire. Very little has come out about the shooter. Uh, except for the fact that he was found dead. So, two firemen, I believe, who were responding to the Idaho brush fire are deceased. One is in critical condition. And you know what? You, it's just giving evil people ideas. And I don't think it gets more depraved and more horrific than starting to take shots at someone who's trying to put out a fire, whether it's a fireman or a policeman or someone trying to save an individual or a property. It doesn't get more vile than this. And I hope and I pray that I'm wrong, but these sort of things will continue to escalate, will continue to take place. And I'm very curious as to whom this individual was. The SWAT team found the man dead on the mountain with a gun nearby. That's all they've released thus far. They have not released his name. They have not released his political leanings. And so we're in a wait and see sort of environment. Even though, and again, I look at situations, and my first question is who profits? And my second question is what is the effect that they're hoping to have by causing this? And when I left, which was 3 weeks ago, the big thing on the news were all the riots in California and other states that were taking place, trying to prevent the ICE agents from doing their jobs. Now, somebody somewhere was smart enough to ask the question, who profits? And the second question they began to ask, which I think scared these individuals a lot to the point that I haven't heard a thing about riots in America anymore, was who was financing these riots? Once that question started being asked, once people began to inquire who was putting up the money for all the signs and all the flags and all the violence and all the angry young people, it died down with such suddenness as to make one think the world had gone to sleep. So every time you see something like this take place, the first question you have to ask is who profits from this? Who profits from chaos? Who profits from violence? Who profits from uncertainty in a certain state, in a certain city, in a certain neighborhood? And the second question you need to ask is who is funding this? Because I promise you, none of this is organic. I have Mexican friends. And I know you're thinking to yourself, that's like people saying they have black friends. That means you don't. No, I like Mexican food a lot. I have Mexican friends. And every single one of them who is here legally, who started a business, who started a restaurant, who started a lawn care service, whatever it is, are not at all upset by this administration arresting and deporting people with records, people who committed crimes, and people who are here illegally, just siphoning the system. I know this may come as a surprise and a shock to some, but no, all of the immigrants that are here legally, that are working and sweating and bleeding to make sure that their family eats, are not upset by what this administration is doing. So if the people who would be affected most directly are supporting the idea of getting criminals out of the country as quickly as possible, who exactly is ratcheting up the violence? Who exactly is ratcheting up the rhetoric where they're starting to call for people to get assassinated again? As I've said before, the reason they keep talking about these things isn't innocent. It's not something they do without realizing what it may cause. The reason people call for violence is because they hope that somebody, one individual who's unhinged, sees their message and acts upon it. Whenever you see an individual calling for violence, whenever you see an individual calling for resistance, this is the revolution, they're hoping that somebody who's unhinged will do the dirty work for them. Because they're chicken. They're weak-willed, they're cowardly, and they don't want to put their own skin on the line. And so they're hoping that by rhetoric, by words, they'll convince somebody to forfeit their life, to do what they're unwilling to do, and then point to that individual and say, see what your administration caused? Look, we have to be logical about these things. And I know that some people who listen to this program are perfectly fine with no borders, one big global thing. But when you see what's happening in places like Hungary, when you see that there are, little islands of actual reason and logic who still try to cling to morality in whatever form, who still try to cling to family, who still try to rebuff this onslaught of hedonism and perversion. If we were that one big happy family global government, those individuals would not have a voice. They would be silenced. And even though they were elected by their own citizenry, the powers that be would find a way to either trump up charges against them, indict them on something, throw them in prison, or do away with them in some manner. Look, I've been here for a week. And the one thing that I've heard consistently was how betrayed the average citizen felt with what happened with the Romanian elections. That was an on its face corrupt move by powerful nations in Europe who did not want the man that got duly elected by the Romanian people to be the next president. And so the Supreme Court of Romania nullified the election. In the meantime, they indicted the man that won on charges that were proven false. They had another election without him on the ballot, and wouldn't you know it, somebody who is 180 degrees in principle from the individual that won has magically become president-elect. Because the guy that won and got the election taken from him didn't want war in Europe. He was staunchly against putting boots on the ground in Ukraine. He was staunchly against funding for armaments because he said without all of Europe going to war against Russia, Ukraine does not have a shot at winning. That was his platform. He said the Ukrainian people are in a bind. We feel for them. Our hearts go out to them. But our hearts go out to our own young men more. And we don't want them to go and bleed and die on Ukrainian soil for a war that they have no lot in. Now, it's being whispered that the nation that had the most influence as far as the Romanian elections are concerned is none other than France. I know, between making croissants and baguettes, apparently the French decided to do a little election meddling too. This is what I'm hearing. Because the individual that is now president-elect is very pro-war. He is trumpeting the idea that we should band together with nations such as France and go show the Russians a what for. Either these people don't understand what war is, or they think that they've cocooned themselves enough where it won't affect them. But if war sparks in Europe, it will be a world war. There's nowhere you can go where a nation is unaffected by all of Europe going to war. And the one individual that was against the idea of war somehow got the election taken away from him. And the individual that is pro-war, even though he got less votes than the guy that won, fair and square, but apparently the Supreme Court of Romania said nay. Well, now he's president-elect. So if you don't think that corruption is part and parcel of politics worldwide, you don't understand the stakes that these individuals are playing for. You don't understand just how horrid a thing politics is. This is why before the 2024 election, I was confident that they'd pull a rabbit out of the hat and install Kamala Harris somehow. I mean, they tried. I understand that there are, oh no, that was a fake bullet with a fake blood and fake ear, and people died at that rally. So let's not minimize the death of innocent people because we're trying to push a narrative. So it's not as though they didn't try, it's they failed. And the candidate they put forth was so unlikable and off-putting that it wasn't even close enough to try to cheat their way to a win. Now, I'm sure that there's a lot of people banging their heads against walls going, why didn't we just let him win in 2016? Because they had the House and they had the Senate. He would have been, a toothless tiger at best. I mean, he'd get on Twitter and start, ranting, but as far as getting policy through, no, it was a Democrat House, a Democrat Senate, a Republican president. It would have been basically a stalemate for 4 years. So I'm sure in hindsight, the people that orchestrated 2020 or 2016, no, 2020, my, time flies, doesn't it? The people that orchestrated 2020 aren't happy with their decision at this point because they didn't see a way that the big orange man would win again. Well, he's here now, and the Supreme Court just decided that one judge in some district can't make law for the rest of the land. And again, the Pied Pipers, tuning their instruments and vocal cords, have come out, well, then now we have a king. No. When one activist judge could decide the fate of an entire nation, that's when you have a de facto king. When a duly elected president makes lawful decisions, he's doing his job. Like I said, imperfect person by any means. But he's been racking up some wins. Even if you dislike the man, these past couple of weeks, he has been racking up some wins. Not least of which is the Israel-Iran ceasefire. I mean, who'd have thunk that this thing wasn't going to drag out for the next 3-4 years? So there's something to be said for decisive leadership. I know he's not being nice about it. Sometimes you can't be nice. Sometimes you have to be brutal, because if you're not brutal in the short term, a lot more people are going to die in the long term. The next thing that I think was a win for America, at least for the American taxpayer, was NATO decided that they were going to reach into their little, coin pouch and boost their spending. Well, they were just scared of it. Well, so what? He's a strong leader who made a demand, and these people realized, we're not going to play games with this guy. Since when is it the responsibility of the American citizen to foot the bill for NATO's defense? That's the question. Well, he could have been nicer about it. Why? It's just a question. Why? Why should he have been nicer about people who have been profiting off the American taxpayer for decades, who are unwilling to spend their own money for their own defense, because the schmucks in North America were writing big checks for them? It's not as though they can't afford it. They took that money that they were supposed to spend for their defense, and they built roads, and they built parks, and they built centers. I'm driving through little towns in Romania, and all of these buildings that were built, I promise you, were built with grants from the European Union. And they're called community centers, and they have indoor pools, just glass-covered buildings. And no, Europe wouldn't have had the money to spend for the buildings if they were footing the bill for their, defense. But then again, it's not the American taxpayer's responsibility to pay for the defense of NATO. Now, the Supreme Court ruling we mentioned, that was also a big deal, because everything this administration tried to do was hobbled and stopped by one judge somewhere. Well, I am offering this wisdom. I think there should be a nationwide injunction on all deportations. I have spoken, let it be thus. Isn't that the individual acting as a king? A district court judge deciding the law of the land. So anyone who thinks that the Supreme Court wasn't right in their decision, you should just dwell on it for just a smidge. Just think about it. Even if you don't like the big orange man, consider this. Do you want an activist judge somewhere in some district having more power than the duly elected president of these United States? Because I promise you, at some point, one of these judges would have done something or said something that you are morally opposed to, but because you co-signed all the other things, the deportation things, bring them all back. Empty the prisons in El Salvador and bring back all those criminals to the U.S. Due process for everyone. At some point, they would have done something that you would have opposed, and then you couldn't have said anything because, well, you agreed with everything else. Now, again, I'm not a big fan of this spending bill. I think that in the short term, it may offer some relief, but in the long term, our kids and grandkids will get saddled with more debt, and that's not something that I like or I want to see. And the way that how do I put this? Look, I understand that every elected official has to get something for their constituents, whether money for roads or money for hospitals or whatever. But when you put that, when your deciding factor is what pork is in there for me, rather than is this what is good for the nation, then if I'd had any respect for you, that respect has dissipated. So the way they're going about this, but it's politics. And for better or worse, given what we know of the plans of one Kamala Harris, I think we're still in the net positive. There's no way to know for sure. Because, well, that's just, how do you know? Because some of the things she said were kind of scary, especially for believers, especially for those who say, yes, there is a morality that is well defined, that is anchored in Judeo-Christian principles that we must abide by in order to have a functioning nation. See, it's those individuals that she isolated and focused on, demeaned, and denounced. So, if nothing else, the church is being left alone. Now, is it redeeming the time, given that it's being left alone? No. I think we're repeating the mistakes of the first Bush Jr. term, the first Big Orange Man term, where we believe that a respite means that all our sins are forgiven and prosperity is on the way. I'm not in that camp. Without repentance, any respite we have is temporary. Without a true turning of heart and a humbling of ourselves as a nation, any pause we have on judgment is just that, a pause. It's not a cessation. So the days are still coming. I think we got a chance to breathe a little, but it's not something that we can expect for the long term. Because we're already seeing the pendulum swinging, and usually the pendulum swings every 10 or 12 years. Now it seems to be every 6 to 12 months. The fact that a communist is going to be the next mayor of New York tells you that the pendulum has already started swinging. It tells you that at best, this administration has maybe a year and a half to do what it needs to do before the pendulum swings fully again and they either lose the Senate or the House or both. Because the propagandists haven't gone on vacation. They're still doing what they do. The race baiting is still real. The molding the narrative in such a way where even a positive story is meant to be a negative is still real. And a lot of people don't realize that the other side is very good at taking the hit, licking its wounds, and going back to war. We celebrate every victory for far too long, not realizing that the war isn't over. We've just won a battle. The war is still ongoing. So this is where we are. I know that I'd planned on talking about a lot more stuff, but we're getting close to that time. And so I just want to end today's program by thanking you all for understanding that sometimes events beyond our control compel us to be away from doing the things that we want to do or like to do. And this was such a situation. I'm very glad I made the decision to come. I'm very glad of the time I'm spending with my father. I'm overjoyed at seeing the smile on his face, watching my daughters play in the yard or chase a cat. And I think that whether the Lord grants him grace and healing and he's around for years to come, or it's less than years, this was a good time to be together, to make some memories, and to just fellowship, just be family again. So thank you all for your understanding. Thank you for your prayers. I know we're supposed to end at 53 minutes, so Gino, you got about a minute and a half to regale us with your wisdom and eloquence.
All right. Actually, we got a few minutes. We got to end by 58 minutes, but I do have some things to share. The Holy Spirit has been speaking, and we are definitely in a war with evil in America, and we have to stand for the faith no matter what. We have to contend for the truth. And God told me and Ken Stoller, Pastor Ken, who helps Hand of Help in Romania, speak the truth, don't doubt, stand up for God. You're going to be persecuted. And once you know, today we got a very threatening message from our local left wing, pretty much telling us we deserve a jail cell. All because we're standing for our school board, which in a year ago was very liberal. And now we are on the brink of God, literally through an election and through liberals quitting. We might have a completely Christian and conservative school board in Watertown, Wisconsin. And tonight there will be a protest that we got to walk through to get to the school board meeting to stand for a new candidate running for one of the openings, the 3 openings. And you know what I say? Praise the Lord when you're persecuted. Praise God when it says in Matthew, when people speak evil about you for the Lord's name's sake, because we have swallowed so much liberal garbage, and there's so much a small percentage of wicked people trying to push us around with their agenda, including trying to have bathrooms where gals and guys can intermingle, because one day someone wakes up and says, I'm not a boy, I'm a girl, and transgender things and all these wicked things. There has to be pushback from the church. And if you stand against evil, God will stand with you. That's what I've learned. But as Mike was saying, I like what he says, I don't see the mushroom cloud yet. That's very powerful, because one day there will be one. But God has given us a time of reform. And it should be a time that the church stands up, stands for the faith, gets out and becomes salt and light and defends the truth. And that means in your community, and it means in your state. I do believe there are some good things happening in America and some reform taking place. And I absolutely believe the president is doing his as much as he can to try to see some of that happen. And also, I believe some of that's happening through his cabinet members. But it should happen through the church. And Mike also addressed, that peace is being taken from the earth. Matthew 24, verse 1, Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came to him to show him the buildings of the temple. And Jesus said, see ye not all these things? Verily, I say unto you, there shall not be left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. And he sat upon the Mount of Olives. The disciples came unto him privately, saying, tell us, when shall these things be, and what shall be the sign of the coming and the end of the world? So they want to know what's going to happen in the end days. And Jesus said, take heed that no man deceive you. Many will come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not troubled. Very important right there. The church should not be troubled. And the Lord goes on to say, all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. Nation shall rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famine, pestilence, and earthquakes in diverse places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. That is really important to note, that these things are going to cause sorrow and grief. How much we need Jesus in this time. Then they will deliver you up to be afflicted. They will kill you, and you shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. And then shall many be offended and betray one another and hate one another. That's what Jesus is saying. The Lord is saying this in Matthew. Many shall be offended and shall betray one another and shall hate one another. And many false prophets shall rise and deceive many. And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. This is what Jesus is saying. Look what it says. Because iniquity shall abound, the love of many will wax cold. We cannot allow our hearts to get cold and dry, and we cannot allow us to become complacent. But he that endures to the end, the same shall be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. That's what Jesus told the disciples. And it goes on, when you shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, then let them which are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let him which is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house. Neither let him which is in the field turn back to take his clothes. Woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. But pray your flight not be in winter, or on the Sabbath day. For there should be great tribulation, as such was not seen in the beginning of the world to this time, nor ever shall be. And except the days should be shortened, no flesh will be saved. But for the elect's sake, the days will be shortened. This is the word of the Lord about the end times given to the disciples. Thank you for listening for the Light of Truth broadcast.
Thank you for listening to today's broadcast, The Light of Truth with Michael Boldea. If you would like to order a copy of today's broadcast, please visit our website at handofhelp.com. If you have questions about our ministry, you can email us at handofhelpoffice@aol.com or simply call us at 920-206-9910. God bless you. They are all leaving.